Hello friends, my name is Hannah and here on the Yesterday's World, today we want to talk about Charles Darwin and his life. Join us. Darwin was born in England on February 12, 1809, in an aristocratic, famous, and devout Christian family. He was the fifth child in the family. His father, Robert Darwin, and his mother, Susanna Wedgwood, came from noble English Christian Unitarian families. Darwin's grandparents were doctors and young Darwin was interested in nature, and during his school days he was interested in horse riding and hunting, and in nature he was collecting collections, so that he had collected a complete collection of cockroaches for the first time. He had chosen to have a specimen of a new species of cockroach in his collection, so he received an award from a scientific journal. When Darwin was 8 years old, he lost his mother, who was suffering from a serious illness for many years, so he was a reason for his parents and always sought her satisfaction. Charles Darwin was not interested in school and the classroom during his elementary school years, and as a result, he did not get good grades, so he was considered unintelligent at school. But at that time, he was very interested in reading books by great authors such as Shakespeare. Darwin later mentioned in his memoirs that nothing could stop his progress as much as a school. At the age of 16, his father sent him to A de Niro Medical School to study medicine, but he left the university and went to Cambridge to study religious studies again due to his lack of interest in religious matters. He did not show any interest in learning science. At that time he met Professor John Henslow, who was a professional clergyman and amateur botanist. Over time, a strong relationship was formed between them, and they discussed nature with each other and went on excursions in nature, so that later in the university they called Darwin, the man who walks to Henslow. With great difficulty, Charles completed his studies in the field of geology, and after receiving a letter from Professor Henslow, in which he said that the royal ship Beagle was on a voyage around the world and was looking for a young naturalist. Because Darwin was interested in nature, he traveled around the world as a naturalist, which resulted in the formulation of the theory of evolution. Traveling with a beagle. Due to the delays that occurred for traveling by ship, finally, on December 27, 1831, the journey started with the Beagle. In the first 2 months, Darwin suffered severe seasickness, so that the ship's crew had no hope of his survival. Although he recovered a little later, he remained ill until the end of the voyage. On the first deserted and large island where the ship anchored, Darwin noticed a line at 17 meters and the length of the mountains and the island, and when he went higher, he encountered fossilized shells, but what he saw was the lessons in theology. He had read it did not match, because in theology they said that the earth's water level has not changed since the time of Noah's flood. After about 2.5 months, the ship docked at the first major port in South America. Later, Darwin wrote to his family about his great interest in the forests of Brazil. He was also amazed by the magnificence of the forests and nature. Later, he mentioned in his diary that he was able to collect 69 different types of cockroaches. In Argentina, he found the survival of strange animals and fossils and sent them to England for testing, and the first fossils were sloths, giant big animals. During this trip, Darwin studied fossils and different species of living organisms and concluded from these studies that all types of living organisms that have common ancestors remained, and new species either became extinct or changed to adapt to their living environment. What attracted Darwin's attention strongly was that he encountered a group of nightingales on 2 different islands, which were different from each other, although they were of the same breed. On the first island, nightingales had large and thin beaks and their food was insects. Because there were many insects on that island, but on the next island, due to the lack of insects and the presence of various plants and seeds, the sea urchins had small and hard beaks. That's why it was concluded that animals evolve according to their living environment. Darwin's ideas and findings were in sharp contrast with the contents and lessons he had read in theology. He saw species of animals on each island that had the same species and race, but each place was slightly different in appearance. Darwin married his cousin Emma Wedgwood on January 29, 1839, and the result of this marriage was 10 children, 3 of whom died in childhood. Charles Darwin decided to publish his theory after completing his research and reviewing his observations during his research trip, and other studies. The theory of evolution, or Darwin's theory, states that the species on the planet have survived through a process called natural selection. Theory of evolution: there is a lot of diversity among organisms and all living things. In the meantime, some of these species survive and pass on the characteristics of their species to the next generation by reproducing. Those who can adapt to the environment are selected by nature and take on the task of fighting for the survival of the species. For example, in the beginning, giraffes were like mountain goats and their food was fresh leaves on trees, but because they had short necks, they could not provide all the food they needed. Later, due to a genetic mutation during reproduction, giraffes were born, whose necks were slightly longer because it was easier for them to get food. They had more chances to survive, and this has caused them to survive more and the birth of a generation with long necks. And this evolution happened over several million years. The species that have been able to adapt to the conditions and have evolved to meet their changing needs have grown and multiplied, but the species that have not been able to adapt to the conditions or have failed to evolve and reproduce are dead, and practically their generation has gone extinct. Through his observations and studies of birds, plants, and fossils, Darwin observed similarities among species all over the globe that were accompanied by differences related to specific locations. During these studies, he concluded that the species we know today evolved gradually from common ancestors. Darwin's theory of evolution and the process of natural selection was later known as Darwinism. When Darwin announced this theory, other naturalists believed that all species originated at the beginning of the world or were created throughout natural history. Naturalists during Darwin's time and before his theory believed that species remained the same over time. Finally, it was in 1858 that, after years of scientific research, Darwin expressed his revolutionary theory during a detailed paper at the meeting of the Linnean Society. A theory in which he dealt with the theory of general evolution. On November 24, 1859, he published a detailed and complete explanation of his theory in his most famous work, On the Origin of Species. In the next century, DNA studies also became scientific evidence for Darwin's theory and completed Darwin's theory of evolution. Of course, this theory still has critics in many societies and many people are against this theory. The controversy surrounding the conflict of this theory with the topic of creationism from a religious perspective still exists among people. The belief that all nature is born from God is in complete conflict with Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. Charles Darwin died on April 19, 1882, in Downhouse, England. Doctors at that time diagnosed the cause of his death as chest pain and heart failure. Some also believe that he had chronic Chagas disease, infectious disease, because after returning from his long trip, he had symptoms such as fatigue, eczema, nausea, headache, and heart palpitations that stayed with him for the rest of his life. Darwin's work and ideas continue to influence the world of science and beyond, and his story is a testament to the power of curiosity, perseverance, and an unrelenting pursuit of the truth. Thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more videos on history and science.